Hello and welcome to Startup Productivity in Personal Life, Week 8 by Anton Januska. That's me. And today we're going to talk about more productivity. Just as a background, I'd like to start every episode with kind of telling you guys that I work at a startup. I am a senior engineer. I've worked at startups for the past 6 years, and I've worked in all kinds of different project management situations, and I wanted to apply a lot of these principles in my own personal life. And today I actually have a very special episode. I'm not only screen recording this, but I also have Zencastr running, so I'm recording an audio there, and I'm also running Audacity, so this will be available as a podcast. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, I'm sorry that you don't get to see the slides, but there is a YouTube video that you can watch, and I'll go ahead and put that into the show links. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I don't think I made a slide for it, which kind of makes me mad, but you know, I'll do my best. So if you, for the viewers, if you see me glancing over here, it's because I have all the different recording applications over here, and it kind of lets me know what the hell is going on. But yeah, I guess let's dive in. Since this is the first podcast episode, I also want to give a little bit more background. I do these every week. This is week 8. It's kind of like a stand-up, maybe retrospective kind of thing where I talk about what I've done, what I plan to do next week. And recently, I think 3 weeks ago, I started sharing tips on productivity and some things that I've learned along the way. And I hope that you guys find it useful. You guys, I want to be gender neutral. I hope everyone finds it useful, all of my viewers. My voice is kind of, I'm not losing my voice, but my voice is kind of off today, so hopefully it's not going to affect things too much. I do plan on getting a better mic soon, so anyway. So I like to start off talking about some tips and apps, some things that I've been discussing and something I've been using in the past week. And the first one is Zencastr. So Zencastr is an online recording, podcasting kind of software. It's totally free. I don't know if it has a payment situation, but basically you can record on Zencastr while you're recording somewhere else. You can have several people record at once. Once you press the record button, everybody who's invited and listening at the same time, all of that will record at once into a single audio file, or maybe it records into several audio files. Yeah, I'm using that right now to record my podcast. And if you hear in the background, my daughter, she's just hanging out, and she's right outside of my office. She likes to say hi sometimes. The second one would be, so the second app that I'm using is Audacity, and Audacity is kind of like the industry standard for open source voice recording. And what's great about Audacity is that it's not only great for voice recording, but like audio recording in general, if you want to like create your own audio. And I see a lot of podcasters, I think most podcasters that I know use Audacity. And if they don't use Audacity, they do use Zencastr. I've had some issues with Zencastr. Well, it's not Zencastr, it's with Chrome. Chrome kind of distorts the audio for some reason for me. It's not just for Zencastr, it's for Hangouts as well. So this is kind of a good situation where I can record it here if I still have that problem. And if not, then whatever. That's great. The next app is Open Broadcaster software. So Open Broadcaster software, again, is an industry standard for streaming. I use it for recording these vlogs, but I also use it for streaming. So when you get on Twitch, unless it's like a pro player, they usually use Open Broadcaster Software Studio or OBS Studio. And it's pretty damn powerful, and I'm pretty sure that my version is outdated because it looks nothing like it does on the website. It looks really amazing on the website. It allows you to set up these different scenes. If you watch on the YouTube video, you usually see like my logo, and then it transitions to like the desktop recording, and that's all done through the OBS. I don't use any video editing software, though I do hope to use it this time. And the last one is Wunderlist. Wunderlist is like a to-do app. Oh, I'm logged in, so I don't want to show that. But it's a to-do list app. It just creates really easy to-do lists. They're really nice. It has really nice UI. I use it all the time. And one tip that I have is to accept failure and keep moving. So like if you're doing something and you encounter some kind of a failure, like learn from it and move on. The quicker you move on, the faster you can get back on track. The longer it takes you, the more difficult it is to get back on track. So just take things with stride, I believe is the saying. So last week, let's talk about what I've done last week. Just a real quick review. Last week I tried out Ember.js, which is an MVC, front-end MVC framework, similar to Angular or React. I had a lot of fun with it. I also implemented CodeMirror for my Markdown editor. So now I have Markdown highlighting, and I have a really nice editor to do everything in, and I'm really excited about it because this was a part that I was really anxious about, and it did take me some time to implement it, but I got it done. The next thing is I got 100 plus words of a day of writing. So I've been writing articles for a podcast, and I do get generally 100 to 200 words a day to basically have about 1,000-word long article by Friday. And I also write my own articles a little bit, and I wrote a little bit of the book, but not really any. I haven't made any progress really, and that's kind of a shame. But I'll explain more about why that is just down the road. And actually, I'm going to talk about it now. So writing. Let's talk about writing. For just the future reference, I have two sections that I talk about writing and my Markdown editor. Those are my two current projects. Writing involves writing a book. The Markdown editor involves creating a Markdown editor. So as far as writing, there's one concept that I kind of came across called prewriting. And what the fuck is that? Prewriting is like a combination of first draft and plotting. So I have a really easy time writing a first draft if it's a free form kind of situation where I don't have plot. I think I've stressed this over the weeks. When something's plotted out, I have a really, really tough time actually writing it. But when I have it free flow, it's really easy for me to do it. So pre-writing, for my idea of that, is basically trying to write out a plotted story, and it's like a combination between first draft and plotting, where you're trying to have more writing than plot, but it's a little bit less than a first draft. It's something in between, like where you try to get through the difficult parts, figuring out what the hell your character is doing, what's going on, who your character is. And I believe that the best way of doing this is writing out the first few chapters and then going back and starting over. Even though you're going to have to rewrite that first draft, I just feel more comfortable with this. And I'm really excited about doing this for NaNoWriMo. It takes a lot of pressure off of you. Because pre-writing is kind of like, well, first draft is first draft, but this doesn't have to make sense whatsoever. So it takes a lot of pressure off of me because I feel like I have to write to get to 50,000 words. Pre-writing doesn't require that. At least how I use it. And pre-writing is really primed for a rewrite. So what I'm excited about is approaching NaNoWriMo. And that's my daughter banging on the wall. I'm excited about approaching NaNoWriMo with having somewhat of a draft, having some writing down that will help me start over and start well. So I want to talk about NaNoWriMo. It's less than 2 weeks. It's about 2 weeks out. 2 weeks out. That's not a lot of time. Pre-writing, and this is why pre-writing is perfect for NaNoWriMo, at least for me. So one thing that NaNoWriMo requires is 1,700 words a day. That's a lot of words. So how am I going to accomplish that? I've been asking myself. So one thing is that when I have free flow writing, it's really easy for me to just write. I can write 1,700 words. I can write 2,000. I think I've topped out at 3,000 to 5,000 words in a day. That's not hard. And when I have to adhere to a plot, it's a lot of work. So pre-writing is really going to help me with that. And I'm going to try to stay at the 1,700 words a day. Actually, I try not to write over the weekends, so I'm going to have to figure out how many weekdays there are in November and divide by that. I think it's around 2,000 words or 2,100 words that I'm going to have to write a day. So it's a little bit more, but it's not too bad. And if I find some time over the weekend, I'll be able to catch up. And I guess let's move on to next week. So I'm going to be doing more pre-writing, and I'm going to do some article writing. Sorry guys, I got to full screen this real quick. And well, why am I not getting to specifics? Why am I not, pre-writing, article writing? It's not really specific. For Agile and, Agile like Scrum and Kanban, I guess, or Kanban, I like calling it Kanban. You got to be really specific, and I'm being really vague. We'll talk about that. So let's talk about my Markdown editor, Omen. I've made major progress because I have the CodeMirror up with Markdown highlighting. and it's amazing. It looks amazing. And I'm not going to show it on the video just because it's really rough, and I want to wait until I have something better. For you guys that are listening in, you're not missing out on anything this week, but next week you might be. So I would suggest skipping around the YouTube video from the show notes if you want to see what my Markdown editor looks like. And another thing that I did was work a lot on Ember.js. I had a lot of fun with that. We'll talk about that a little bit. And standard versioning. So I implemented standard versioning for my Omen Markdown editor. Just as a heads up, Ember.js, I'm not using it to write anything for the Markdown editor. It was more like a side project, a little bit of a tangent. But yeah, let's talk about Ember.js. So what is Ember.js like? It's very Rails-like. For any Ruby developers, Rails developers, I think you guys know what I mean. Everything has a place. If you're writing a service, there's a folder for that. Everything automatically gets pulled from there. If you're writing a model, you know where that goes. If you're writing a controller, you know where that goes. Everything has a place. If you want to create some kind of a filter, the convention, the powerful conventions will tell you where to go and where to create the file and how to write it. And that's really powerful. I think one of the coolest things about Rails is this really strict but sensical convention that kind of frees you to write your logic, and you don't have to kind of think about how you're going to implement that logic. And Ember.js really stress that part. It has a really powerful CLI as well, so I would say that's a little bit Rails-like, because you have these generators, so you can generate a new route, you can generate a new controller, and whatever. And when you do that generation, it creates not only the file, but it also registers it in the right place, and it will also register tests and stub out tests for you. So usually failing tests, so you know that you need to implement it. It was a very refreshing experience because in Angular and React and all these different things, you kind of got to figure out your own way of doing things. In Angular, not as much. You still have services and stuff like that, but still, like, over the past 2 years, the conventions and the standards have been changing, and people still don't agree on things exactly. And I've seen that happen a lot. And with React, there's no convention. I mean, Flux has come out, but it's still kind of like all over the place. Redux has come out, MobX, like all these different things. So it was refreshing to see a framework that knows exactly where to go and what to do. I had a lot of fun with it. I got through almost the entire tutorial. I had no need to really deploy an application to Surge or anywhere else, but I do recommend going through the tutorial if you want to learn about Ember.js. It'll take I think like a couple hours maybe, and you'll get a good sense of what it's like and if you want to use the framework. Also, nice thing was that they were using handlebars for templating, so it kind of makes the templates feel more portable and accessible. Let's talk about versioning. So that was the other thing I wanted to talk about. So I want to talk about like some things that I used. One of them is semantic versioning, and I have a link open, so I'm going to show that to the viewers. So semantic versioning or semver is this idea of it's an NPM standard. That's the first thing. So whenever you have an NPM package, you can specify that you want to automatically update the patch version. So what the versioning looks like for semantic is that you have a major dot minor dot patch version. So if it's a 1.0.0, it's version 1, and version 1 means that it's incompatible with version 0 point whatever. When you have a version 2.0.0, again, 2.2, version 2 is not backwards compatible with version 1. There might be some breaking changes. They might not be major breaking changes, but there are breaking changes, so you can't just drop it in. A minor version update, so like a 1.1.0, means that there has been a feature added or something has been changed that doesn't necessarily, that adds functionality, but does not change the way the application behaves and does not break existing functionality. So you can safely upgrade that version without having to look at it, knowing that everything is going to work how you remember it, except things are going to be better and you're going to have more features. A patch version basically means that there's a bug fix. There's no new feature that's been released, so 1.1.1 would mean that there's a bug fix done from 1.1.0. That's basically all that means. And so this version kind of tells you, you can look at one version and another. You can compare it really easily. You know, if it has the same major version, that means you can easily use it. If it has a different minor version, the newest one will have more features. If they have the same minor version but change at the patch version, you know there has been some bug fix done. The next thing I want to talk about was so I wanted to implement standard semantic versioning in my application. Then there's a package called standard version. So standard version is not a type of versioning, it's a tool that helps you use semantic versioning. And I'm going to show the repository for the viewers real quick. It's a command line tool, so it's a CLI that you can install via npm, and then you just run standard version in your project, in your terminal, and it'll generate an automatic changelog. So it generates an automatic changelog. When you bump up a version, it just shows you what's been changed from the last version. It does automatic tagging for Git. It does automatic version bump for package.json. So it's like an all-around tool that helps you keep up your versioning without having to think about it too much. And it'll bump up your major, minor, and patch version based on your commits. So let's talk about commits and conventions. Oh, the slide is too big, so I'm gonna zoom out. There's a tool called Commitizen that I believe it's not the same people. It's a CLI again. It hooks into Git, so you can do git cz for Commitizen, and it'll create a standard. It'll create like a prompt that'll walk you through creating a standardized commit that then can be used by one of these changelog generators. And standard version is not the only changelog generator out there, obviously. But Commitizen uses like this really standardized commits. So what it does is it figures out what type of a commit you're making. Is it a feature, bug fix, test, CI, build? There are like 6 or 7 different ones. It asks you the location. So if it is a test, is it from the front end, back end? If it is a feature, is it the front end, back end, whatever else? So it's type, and in parentheses, the location, so it's a browser, whatever, and then colon, and then you have a short description. It's a max of 70 characters. And then that goes with the standard on Git and on GitHub, where it shows you only the first 70 characters of your commit message. So this is where you would put, like, I don't know, implement, added code mirror as a markdown editor, or whatever, right? And then you have a long description, so you make a new line, and long description is like a longer thing where it tells you, like, pulled in vendor information for code mirror and implemented it as a directive to work with the existing system, blah, 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 blah. So you have like a longer description. And after that, you have breaking changes. And breaking changes will let Commitizen and standard version know that they need to bump up major version. So for example, if you have an API and change the way the API works and it's not backwards compatible, you would list those breaking changes here, and the changelog will automatically bump it by a semantic version, by a major semantic version. And yeah, so Commitizen is a great tool for changelog generators. So what's next? I'm gonna be working on some code mirror bug fixes, but what about the specifics? Yeah, so I'm leaving you guys in the dark a little bit. Let's get to the next page. I'm gonna be talking about, so now that we got all that out of the way, let's talk about productivity. I want to talk about some things. Whoa, what's going on? Okay, so I want to talk about some issues I've had so far with my productivity system. The number one thing is that I have no outside feedback. I don't have a second person who's going through my pivotal tracker list, my queue, talking to me about it. Are you going fast enough? Are you going slow? Are you picking the right tasks? I have no feedback. And that's really important in a lot of these systems, because the feedback, like Kanban is self-organizing, Scrum has like Scrum leaders and whatever, and they help you keep not only kind of accountable, but they make sure that you do things correctly. And I haven't been doing things correctly because my tasks aren't specific enough. And when tasks aren't specific enough, it's a downfall of a lot of project management projects. And that brings me to my next thing. Let's fill out my pivotal tracker together. So I'm going to go back with the slides real quick and open up my pivotal tracker. For you guys that are listening, well, I'll tell you all about it. So I'm going to delete a few tasks here. I wanted to create a background character stuff on my short story Wrecker, which I wanted to, or recommendation engine, which I wanted to edit, but I just don't have time for it. Right now, I have 4 tasks in doing. One of them is settings research, which is very ambiguous. The other one is clean office, which my office is not clean. And then this vlog and podcast, which I'm doing right now. The tasks that I have in Pivotal Tracker right now that I'm doing is, one of them is get tasks in order. Then I have a bug fix for Omen, a feature for Omen, and another feature for Omen. So let's fill these out together real quick. So I wanted to do some pre-writing. So let's do the writing tasks first. What did I want to do? I wanted to do pre-writing. So where is that? There it is. Okay. So I want to, what is it? Finish chapter 4 will be, chapter 3 will be one task. I'm going to give that 3 points because it's a task that I can't do any more research on. I just have to do it. We're also going to do stub out chapter 4. So that's kind of like a pre-writing, and that's okay. We're going to do stub out chapter 5. Stub out chapter 5. That's going to be a 3-pointer as well. And I think we're going to also do start writing chapter 3 or chapter 4. We're going to do that after we stub everything out. Now, what I mean by stubbing out is like plotting out for that one specific chapter. You're plotting out the scene, rather. So that's going to happen after we finish. So we're going to finish chapter 3. We're going to stub out chapter 4. We're going to start writing chapter 4, and then we're going to do chapter 5. I also wanted to get some article writing in. So let me go ahead and do this. I'm going to add a task called stub out, I guess. What is it? Stub out Anjanus article. Anjanus is my website. So that's gonna be my task. I'm gonna stub out an article that I want to write. The reason I have articles is because it gives me kind of a break from writing the book. So I think that's pretty specific. I don't know like how much further I can get with this. One thing, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna add another task because we want to plan a little bit ahead. I'm gonna add a task called it's gonna be for NaNoWriMo. So I'm gonna do create Nano 2016 project. That's gonna be a 1-pointer. And we're gonna put that under NaNoWriMo label. We're also gonna create set up gulp for Nano 2016 project. So I have a gulp file and a gulp task and a plugin that helps me write. It kind of tells me like how far I am, how many words I've written, and we're gonna put that after we stub everything out. It's not really that important. And what is it? What else can we do with that? Yeah, I think that's it. So that's it for writing. So we have stubbing out several chapters, finishing writing one chapter, starting a new chapter, and creating a Nano 2016 project. I think that's pretty good. Let's talk about Omen. So we're gonna create a task called. So there are some bug fixes with CodeMirror. So we're gonna do CodeMirror. Initial render issues. Initial render issue. So that's gonna be a bug fix. I can't really tell you much about it, guys, because it's just the CodeMirror fails to initially render. You have to like click into the text area for it to expand correctly. And CodeMirror scrolling issue, so you can't scroll through the file itself. It's Omen, which really sucks, because what that means is that you can't scroll. If the text is too long, it just doesn't scroll. And that's okay. Well, we'll deal with that as well. The next task I want to do is CodeMirror quote-unquote black markdown theme. So that's going to mean that everything highlighted is going to be black, actually. That's going to be a 3-pointer. I don't really know that much about it. Right now, it's like vibrant colors, and I really want it to be just black. And last thing will be CodeMirror what is it? Outside margin. So this is going to be that's not an issue. That's going to be a 2-pointer. Right now, what happens with CodeMirror is that it's like in a bounding box, and if the text overflows, which it doesn't, it will disappear. It's like overflow hidden, but like more than that, because I haven't been able to not make it overflow correctly. What I want to do is when I have a heading that has like 2 hashtags or 2 pound signs, I want it to stick out of the text so that the heading name is actually flush with the text. When I do that, those two hashtags disappear. So I'm going to add all these. The Electron Package Manager I can do all the way on the last as the last thing. Permanent listener for notifications, I believe I've done that before. So that would be it. I have enough tasks until November 2nd, and I think that's pretty good because basically in November I'm going to be doing NaNoWriMo and not much of anything else. But yeah, thanks for filling this out with me, guys. I really appreciate it. I find it kind of difficult sometimes. And, just as a heads up, in traditional Kanban, Agile, whatever, this would be several weeks out. So probably after NaNoWriMo, we're going to have to get together and fill out several weeks out worth of issues. I did want to mention something. I didn't mention this before, but I did finish the roadmap to Omen. So let me just pull that up real quick. And it's a crappy roadmap. It's basically being able to save files. I'm done with that. Open to subfolders, CodeMirror editor, Markdown preview, open folder using the native method, and then some keyboard shortcuts. I'm gonna actually add the keyboard shortcuts as one of the things. Keyboard shortcut save file. I think that's the most important one to me right now. That's gonna be a 3-pointer. I don't know much about it. Without being able to do that, I don't want to have to click on an icon every single time. But let's move on. I want to talk about some tools that I use, and oh my god, I have to like zoom out again. I don't know why, but just it doesn't show up correctly. Oh, I should have split this up. So I use a lot of different tools, you guys might have noticed. I use Pivotal Tracker, Wunderlist, and Habitica. So let's talk about each one of them and why I use them. I'm not a big fan of tools overload. I like to keep things lean, simple. I don't like using a lot of tools. So why so many tools? Well, each tool has a specific purpose that the other tool cannot fulfill, and that's the only time that I believe that you can use several tools at once. So like Pivotal Tracker is really great for long-term tracking. It gives you a good forecast into the future. It tracks my velocity, and it's a great dumping place for tasks. I just dump the tasks in an icebox in there, and I don't have to worry about anything. Which reminds me, do I have anything in the icebox here? No, I don't. All right. So I don't have to like worry about it. It's in the icebox. I'll get to it eventually. I'll look at it eventually. And it's just great, and especially the velocity tracking. It's been so helpful just knowing what my average velocity is and that I need how to keep up with that. The next tool is Wunderlist. So I mentioned that as my app of the week. So Wunderlist is great for quick and dirty to-dos. Kind of like, what do I need to do in the next 30 minutes or a couple hours, or even just for the day, just the things that I want to accomplish for the day. Pivotal Tracker can't really do that. It's on a week-long basis. And this would be kind of like, look into CodeMirror, implement CodeMirror. That could be as vague as whatever as I want them to be. They're just kind of for reference so I don't forget to do something. And it doesn't really do any tracking for me. It's just whatever I put in there for the day. Last one is Habitica. And I've talked about last episode how habit tracking is so important. Without habit tracking, you can't really stay on target. You have to kind of develop this discipline, and it's not part of productivity. It's startup productivity, but it is part of individual productivity. Habitica also does gamification, which is really cool because it gives you points, you level up. There's something about it, and there's something about going onto that website and just checking off that you did everything for the day. And it does daily tracking for repeating tasks. Again, something that neither Wunderlist or Pivotal Tracker can do. There's a little bit of a social aspect to Habitica. I have a party that I do Habitica with, and we do quests and stuff like that. So you don't really want to let your teammates down by not fulfilling your daily duties. So kind of several tools, they all have different purpose, and they're all very useful. So it's okay to have several tools as long as you can justify why you're using them. So, normally this would be it, but today's episode is going to run much longer. I'm already at 30 minutes. 30 minutes is pretty long. I think my longest one was about 40 minutes, so maybe we'll get to that. I want to talk about. Um, well, I didn't finish that title. I wanted to talk about Kanban and Scrum. Kanban is also sometimes pronounced Kanban. I'm going to call it Kanban because I like that. And I want to talk about, Kanban versus Scrum. What are the differences? How are they similar? And what can you learn from both of those? So let's talk about Kanban real quick. So, I'm running off the page again. That's okay. Can I scroll? No, I can't. So Kanban is, kind of imagine Trello. Trello is a pretty good tool. Trello is basically like a board with a bunch of different lists, and each list can have a task, or like each list can have like a whole list of tasks that you can move from one list to the next. Um, I think that's the best analog. Each task in Kanban is a quote unquote card, and that card is not just the task itself, but description and some information about that task. So if you have to implement CodeMirror, it might have the link to CodeMirror, it might have some other resources, it might have a screenshot of what it should look like. And the interesting thing about Kanban is that it's this board, but it's specifically split in a specific way. It has some interesting processes that make it very powerful. So the work is always split into several lists on that board. The main one is backlog, or one of them is the first one is backlog. Backlog is basically a dumping ground for tasks. I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. Whatever is in your mind and you need to do, you throw it into your backlog. The to-do is kind of the things that you're focusing on right now. So you're kind of, you're looking at that huge backlog and then use that to-do as a cue for the tasks that are coming up for you that you need to do. So if you need to, in project management, if you need to, implement CodeMirror, every task related to CodeMirror would be in that to-do list, and you would take it out of the backlog. One thing I want to mention real quick is with the idea of these tasks. So both Kanban and Scrum are agile, and something that agile requires is that the tasks are as specific as possible, so that you have a lot of cards, you keep moving them, and there's a huge sense of progress. You don't have one big card like implement CodeMirror. You have register CodeMirror as a dependency, implement directive, push text into it, write tests, whatever. So you have that huge task split into as many cards as possible. Anyway, back to the lists on the board. So you have a backlog, you have a to-do list, then you have an in progress. That means that you're currently working on it. And then you have like this nebulous number of steps, whatever works for your organization, and after that you're done. So that nebulous number of steps could be code review, testing, it could be approval of some kind. It could be that, after you're done developing the feature, you need to hand it off to another developer to look over it. Whatever it is, you create a list for each one of those steps, and you just have tasks moving from one to the next one constantly until you get to done. Once you get to done, you wait until you can deploy your code, or basically make your code actionable, and then it's delivered, and it goes off the board, and it's archived. So you no longer care about it. And you keep this flow very constant. It's just nonstop. You grab it to do, you put it in progress, you finish the steps, you get it done, you grab the next task. There's no discussion in between. One thing that you measure in Kanban is cycle time. How long does it take an average task to go from either backlog or to-do until they're actually done? I think it's better to measure it from to-do. So when you put it into to-do, how long does it take you on average to get that task into done? And that's the metric that you follow. And it gives you, once you get that average, you know your average time to implement a card. There are no sprints, so it is constant workflow. You don't fill up your to-do queue for 2 weeks, and if you get done early, you're done early. If you get done late, you freak out and you feel like you need to finish it as quickly as possible. You just fill up the queue with the things that you're working on, and that's it. Let's talk about the advantages of Kanban. Kanban implements purposeful bottlenecks to find issues. So you have a to-do list. That to-do list can have a max of 15 tasks. You can't shove any more than that. If there are several tasks that keep lingering in to-do list on top, there's something wrong. if you put task in progress, there are only, let's say, 4 tasks that are allowed in progress at the same time for for 4 developers. So a developer can work on only one task. Is one task is stuck there for a long time, you know something's wrong. If you have, let's say, 8 tasks maximum for a 4 developer team, you know that if one of those tasks is stuck there, that means that the developer is having issues and keeps working on other tasks instead. So these kind of bottlenecks, whether if it's in progress and it can be in review, or sorry, the in review list is filled up with the max number of tasks, you can't move on with the in progress task, and there's an issue. So it kind of makes it very apparent if there's a problem. The other advantage is constant flow of work. You're not waiting on sprints. You're not stressing out about making it work, making things done within a sprint. You just keep going. And there's also constant deployment. So usually with a sprint, you deploy at the end of a sprint with all of your stuff. With Kanban, you're done with a task, you deploy it. And, as soon as you're able to actually deploy it, you deploy it. So if I implemented a code mirror as a dependency, I'll deploy it even if it doesn't do anything. And Kanban is also self-organized. That means there's no Scrum leader or whatever. It's a bunch of people that agree on things and talk about it. So that's another advantage. You have no manager, you have no project manager. It's completely self-organized. And I think that works really well for small teams, and I think it works very well on siloed bigger teams. So, but I'm not sure. I haven't used it much. The only times that I've used Kanban, directly Kanban, I wasn't a big fan of it. Maybe because I didn't implement it completely. It didn't implement the X number of steps between in progress and done completely, and I think that created a lot of issues. But also it was really confusing to have this huge list of to-do tasks. I don't know. There are definitely a few things that I didn't implement when I needed to, like that, the bottlenecks and everything, things that are key to Kanban. So maybe I can't really speak on it. I like it though. I like the idea of it. So, but let's move on to Scrum and see how that's different. I do want to mention again, Kanban is agile, as Scrum is agile. It's just a different way of doing things. Let's talk about Scrum. So Scrum, rather than having these lists where you go from to do, in progress, done, you have a grid. And the grid is interesting because instead of having tasks being cards, there's stories, and those stories form an epic. So you might have 4 tasks related to code mirror, and those will form a single epic. If you're watching, you might have seen a Pivotal Tracker. I can tag things. Those tags create epics, and I can track an epic and what's going on with it. So in that grid, imagine you have like a backlog, and the backlog you have a big card that says, this is the epic, and right next to it in the to-do list, you have these stories that go into that epic, and then you move cards the same way as you would in Kanban. But you do have 2-week sprints. That means that you fill up your backlog with 2 weeks worth of tasks, or you fill up your to-do list, whatever that initial thing is, with 2 weeks worth of tasks, and you try to get all of them done at the by the end of the week. And that's kind of what the basis of Scrum, having these 2-week sprints. Scrum involves a lot of other methodologies as well, like retrospective. It means that at the end of 2 weeks, you sit down and you're like, well, what went wrong? Did we get everything accomplished? If we didn't, what do we need to do better? The key metric for Scrum is velocity. So while Kanban try to measure how long a task takes to get done completely, Scrum measures how long how many quote-unquote points you get done within a 2-week sprint. So in Scrum, stories get points assigned, and you can create your own point system. I did. Or not, I didn't. I took it from somebody else, but I didn't use the traditional Scrum system. You can have points represent time, so you think 1 point is like not a lot of time, 2 points is a little bit of time, 3 points is like, well, it's going to take me a while, 5 points, oh, this is a major project. And as you get them done within those 2-week sprints, you add up all the points of all the stuff that you've done, and that's your team velocity, and it gets averaged over time. So let's say you have 5 1-point tasks, and you get them done within a week. That's your 5 points is your velocity, and the next week you get 8 points done, and the week after you get 4 points done. So let's say that averages out to, I don't know, like 6 or something like that. So you know that on average you're going to get 6 points worth of tasks done based on your point system. My point system, the one that I'm using in Pivotal Tracker, by the way, is very Scrum based. It doesn't use lists, It uses like a long, never-ending queue, which is okay. I really like that. It kind of uses lists, but not entirely. Um, it tracks your velocity, and like my velocity is 20 points. That means that I can get 21-point tasks done, or 5-point tasks done, pretty consistently. And I find that really, really useful because it tells you how much work you can get done. Scrum also implements something called a burn down chart. Basically, it's a way to estimate how long something's going to take you to finish by the work left versus the time that you have left as well. Scrum is really great for like estimating how long these big projects take, because if a big project takes 80 points and you do about 30 points, a sprint every 2 weeks, that means that it's going to take you about 6 weeks to get everything done. The advantage is that you have regular sprints. These regular sprints are great because every 2 weeks you kind of reset from zero and you figure out, what do I need to do for the next amount of time. And you have these things like retrospective, where you get to sit down and talk about it. You have like the initial planning, where you plan out all these different tasks. With Kanban, it's not really as apparent. You don't have a sit down time. You don't have a time where you're like, hey, let's look at how we've been doing things. It's not there, but it is a key part of Scrum. Scrum also has roles. So Kanban was self-organizing. In Scrum, you have a product owner, Scrum Master, and you have team members. Team members, it kind of defines a chain of command in a way, because a team member can say like, hey, during a sprint, I'd like to change something. And you're not really supposed to change things in a sprint. In Kanban, you can change things at any point. In a sprint, you're kind of set for those 2 weeks of what you need to do. But if you need to make a change, you can inform your next higher up, and that person will have authority over, yes, this will get done, or no, it won't get done, and nobody else can override them. So it's like a more of like a management role, but because you have a product owner, Scrum Master, there's a little bit of like balance, I would say. Scrum also has time limits, so there are deadline estimations, which is great. With Kanban, it's a little bit different. I'll talk about that. And I think the point system in Scrum is amazing. I'm not a fan of the fact that Kanban does not have points, but what do we do with points, right? It tracks cycle time, it doesn't track velocity. I am really glad that I know that I get 20 points worth of stuff done every week, because it gives me, when I write out my tasks, one thing that Pivotal Tracker does is that it automatically takes from your backlog 20 points worth of tasks, and tells you, hey, this is what you need to do this week. But it tells me like what I can expect of myself, and if I'm slacking, if I'm having a bad week, or if I'm having a really good week. So it gives me a lot of like retrospective on myself. I like that a lot. But let's talk about one versus the other then. Kanban versus Scrum. We talk about what each one is. Let's really try to distinguish between them. So let's talk about tasks. So in Scrum, smaller groups, tasks are grouped into larger tasks. You have these small stories like, add code mirror as a dependency, put code mirror into a directive, implement directive with the main system, write tests. You group them all into an epic. And I think that's really great because it helps you track these features that are made up of a lot of different tasks. The next thing is that the to-do list reflects a sprint. So when you look at the to-do list, you're like, okay, this is what needs to be done in the next 2 weeks. You don't have to guess as to what's going to happen next week or the week after or whatever. It's just you have a nice to-do list that tells you this is what's going to happen in 2 weeks. This should be done in 2 weeks. And I also like the fact that, another thing is that it's very basic with to do, doing, and done. There are no million in-between steps. Now, Pivotal Tracker doesn't do this. Now, Pivotal Tracker is supposed to be Scrum, but it does more steps than doing. It does task is done, task is delivered, task is accepted as being delivered by somebody else. And I like that. It gives you a lot of like accountability, and the more steps you have, I feel like the more granular you can get with where your project is. But Scrum implements just basic to do, doing, done. With Kanban, it's small tasks all around. You don't have epics, you don't group things in any way. I've seen people use tags, but it's not necessarily part of Kanban. The to-do list is a never-ending queue. You don't have a sprint. When you look at your to-do list and it's 300 tasks long, that's not for the next 2 weeks. You just keep working on it. That's it. That queue is going to keep filling up. You're going to keep removing tasks, and it's as simple as that. The other thing is that the workflow is very thorough. You don't have to do doing done. You have to do X number of steps that you need to accomplish, and then you're actually done with your work. So that's kind of cool because a lot of times, yeah, you have code review, so you're done with it, but you have a code review, so you're waiting for somebody else. Maybe you have QA testing, so you're waiting for somebody else. Maybe you have something else, and then you're actually done. Yeah, so those are the differences with that. Let's talk about planning. So Scrum is 2 week sprints. You plan for 2 weeks. You look at your number of points per velocity, and you figure out what you can get done in those 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, you deploy. With Kanban, you have no deadline, no task requirements. You don't have to get 300 tasks done by the end of the week. You don't have to get 5 tasks done at the end of the week. You just get done whatever you get done. You do try to shorten the cycle time, but don't think about this as like, oh, you have no deadlines. You still have deadlines in the real world. You just don't have deadlines as part of the system. And the cool thing about Kanban is also in planning, you have an in-process and doing limit. In Scrum, you don't. You can have 16 tasks in process and work on them separately whenever you want to. In Kanban, you can have, let's say, 5 tasks in process, but you can't move on. You can't add more tasks into in process until you remove one from in process. And that's really nice. Forecast. So Scrum lets you forecast by taking the feature. You have a feature and it takes a number of tasks. That each task takes a number of points to do. So you multiply the number. You add all the points in a feature in all the tasks in the feature, and the number of points per sprint per velocity. So you get to kind of forecast that. If you have a major feature that takes 10 tasks and each one of them is 2 points, that means that it takes 20 points to do. If your 2 week sprint, you get 40 points worth of stuff done, you'll definitely get that feature done. In Kanban, it's a little bit more complicated. So a task takes X amount of time to cycle, to go through a cycle. So let's say a task takes 5 days to go through a cycle. That means that if you have 10 tasks per feature, that means that that'll take 50 days. It's not entirely clear to me how you can estimate, but maybe that's not the point. I think a more accurate formula would be number of tasks times the cycle times divided by number of developers. So if it takes 5 days to go through, again, you don't have one person working on a task for 5 days. That person will maybe get it done within a day and it'll go into code review, but it takes 5 days to go through. So maybe if one developer or whatever, it's more complicated math for me. I'm having trouble just imagining how you'd estimate it. But if you look at a feature and it's 4 tasks and you have 4 developers, that means that feature will be done within 5 days. I don't know. It's a little bit confusing with that. It's kind of like that because it's continuous. I think it's a little bit confusing with that. It's kind of like how an episode of Family Guy takes 6 months to do, but you don't have the same person working on that 6 months. A writer will get it done in a week. Animators take 2 weeks. Voice recording takes another 2 weeks. It adds up. So it's one of those things. But those writers, that second week, it's not like they don't do anything. They're writing the next episode. The week after, they're writing the next episode. So it's kind of like that. And let's talk about what they have in common. So they use clear visual cues for progress. That's that board. That board is important. Whether you have lists or a grid, whatever you're using, it tells you exactly where you're at with your project. You have a measurement for forecasting, so both of them have some kind of measurement, whether it's cycle time or velocity. And they are both agile, which means that they both require a small task breakdown. I think it makes it very portable to go from one system to another because those tasks should be the same size, basically. And my question is, why not use both? And in fact, a lot of companies do, but not when they initially switch from Agile. What I often see, and what I've seen blog posts written about, is that people they switch to Agile, they use Scrum because it's so solid and rigid, and after a few months where they get used to breaking down things into small tasks, communicating very clearly, using the board to forecast, using the board to see what the hell's going on, they merge Scrum and Kanban together, where they might not have sprints, but they still have retrospectives, or they will have sprints but no retrospectives, or where they use a point system in a Kanban. So not only do you get a sense of cycle time, but you also get a sense of velocity as well, because you get to measure how many points are done in a week anyways. So That's kind of my spiel on using Kanban or Scrum. I think both are really great systems. It's great to see that Agile has, Agile development has these two options. I should have made this full screen. I don't know why I didn't. And going through them is really enlightening in terms of like why people do things a certain way. Anyways, that's it for me this week. A 50-minute episode. That's a very long episode, longest one I've done yet. Thank you for listening or watching. I really hope I get to publish this as a podcast. And you will see that if you see this video, it's probably a couple days after I've already recorded it. If you listen to this as a podcast, it might be a couple weeks because I don't know when I'll have time to actually publish it as a podcast. But thank you. Like this has been very useful. This has been very, very useful doing things this way and having like a vlog and going through these things and really spending time on productivity rules and productivity procedures and processes. But I'll see you for next week, week 9.